Today we're talking about gripping technique when training for climbing, and we're starting right now. Hey everyone, it's Bryan with some more Bomber Beta. If you guys like climbing hard stuff, consider subscribing because that's all I talk about. So I've gotten this question a few times in some of my previous videos, and it's what gripping techniques do you use when training for climbing? So I wanted to make this video explicitly talking about the different types of gripping techniques and what I personally do for myself. Quick disclaimer, I am not a trainer, I'm not an expert at grip types, I'm just sharing my personal experiences with you guys. And I hope you guys enjoy and find it very entertaining and informational. So to give you guys a good angle, I have this portable training board that I did a review for. I'm going to leave a link to that up here somewhere. So go ahead and check that out after you watch this video. So first off, I'd like to go through the different types of gripping techniques, and then I'll talk a little bit more about what each one of them means. So the first grip type we want to talk about is the half crimp, and the half crimp is going to be when you have your fingers at about a 90-degree angle, not including the pinky. The pinky is going to be more based on what your finger size is. I'm going to let you guys see what my hand looks like. So you see, I think my pinky is relatively short, and I have a relatively short index finger in comparison to my ring finger. So that affects how these grips work, but you can try to get them close to what I'm presenting here. So that half grip again is going to be where we have 90 degrees on the first three fingers. The second grip type I want to talk about is the 3-finger open or 3-finger grab, and with this we're going to have completely open on the first three, and we're going to have our pinky sitting down right here. I have what I think is a pretty cool picture of me actually grabbing a hold with just my 3 fingers completely open, and I felt so strong in that position. It looks a little strange, like if you've never tried it before, you'd think there's no way that position is actually good, but it actually can be a very powerful position if you train it. So I'll go into that a little bit later, but that is the second one. So the third grip type is going to be the 4-finger open or the 4-finger drag, and this one I find myself kind of, when I try to do the full or the half crimp, I sometimes end up in this position, which is definitely not ideal, but it's something that can happen, and it's probably worth training a little bit. So it's basically when, we have a half crimp there, and then we drop it to the 4-finger open. If you can see, that first pointer finger is now more in an open position, whereas my middle finger is still in that half crimp position. And I think this is a little bit about my index finger being relatively short. I tend to more naturally get into this position rather than this position, because this position I'm really having to almost go into more of a full crimp with my middle finger, whereas the 4-finger drag or open is a little more natural for me. Another common thing is when you have pockets, and this is kind of more of a special case thing, but training for pockets is usually a good idea to do in very small quantities, just so you're comfortable in that grip type. So for a 2-finger pocket, what I like to do is I like to do middle 2, fairly open, and what I like to do is I like to put my thumb, let me get my other thumb out of the way, on my pointer finger there, and kind of hold that first joint straight up, and then trying to do the same thing with my pinky. So this is going to help relieve some stress on the internal parts of your hand. This is going to specifically reduce lumbrical strain. So if you can imagine, you have your fingers out here. Watch this. So I'm going to try to just move my pinky independently of every other finger. And if you notice, as I'm moving it, my ring finger cannot avoid but go down a little bit. Same thing if we go the other way with my pointer finger, even a little bit. The pointer fingers might be the least connected to the other, but I mean, the middle finger, obviously, I can't go that far. Ring finger, everything moves. So if you could imagine, you end up in this like extremely locked off position. You're creating a lot of stress in these ligaments down here. and that's going to potentially cause a big problem. So that's why I like to try to, you know, instead of being like this in a pocket, I like to be here. You might not feel quite as powerful, but you're going to reduce your chance of injury later on in your climbing. And the last gripping technique I'm going to talk about is the 3-finger half crimp here. It's kind of like the front 3 and then the back 3, which again, back 3 I'm going to use this and try to keep that. You won't probably be able to get, I mean, depending on how long your pinky is, you probably won't be able to get that in the half, but you could kind of imagine that being a good thing to train. I don't know how often you're going to find yourself using back 3 in a pocket. I'm sure some of you experienced, like anybody that often visits like Wild Iris or something might find themselves doing that, but for the general climber, I don't think this is going to be super common, but hey, your mileage may vary. So when it comes to training for climbing, most people try to train the half crimp, which again is that half crimp there, and we're trying to stay in that strong 90-degree angle with our first 3, and then the pinky's going to land wherever it feels comfortable. And I think this is a very powerful position. I find myself going more towards the 4-finger open to train. Now, I don't know if that is the best for everybody, but like I said, with my specific finger anatomy, it feels more comfortable. Now, that being said, I am trying in my training right now to focus more on that half crimping position because I think it's more relevant to climbing holds that I'm weak on. So just to note here, I'm not going to talk about the full crimp that much, but the full crimp is going to be where you actually wrap your hand, thumb over, and you get that, your fingers are going to go like that. See how it's like this joint right here is kind of like hyperextended? So that's a position that we find ourselves in when we're really, really crimping hard. And I avoid that like the plague. I made a video about why you should avoid that. That was backed up by the scientific paper. I'm going to link that up there. Go ahead and watch that if you're interested. But I think we need to train that occasionally with lighter loads just so that you're comfortable with it when you come across it. Because if you cannot, if the hold just wants you to full crimp and you can't full crimp, you're not going to be able to do that climb, and that's something we need to take into account. Same with the open finger. I think that training the open finger, you're going to have less strains on your pulleys, but honestly, this position in the 3-finger drag is one of my strongest positions, and that comes from me shying away from closing my hand a lot, but I excel at climbs that force us into these open-handed positions. So my advice for training in different grip types is to try a little bit of each different grip type in your training, but focus mainly on these 2. So your main one needs to be your half crimp and your 3-finger drag. Those are the 2 that you need to focus most of your effort on, and more so on the half crimp because that is going to translate better to a more wide variety of grip types. Because if you could imagine going from here, you would have more strength here and more strength here. If you only train this, you will not be able to close crimp at all. So just focus on that. Try and do a more of a closed and more of an open, and try to build up to some of these different types of grip types. Like I would avoid training heavily on pockets if you're newer to climbing, because that's going to put a lot of stress on some of these weirder muscles and tendons that you're not really using that much. But training this occasionally will mean that when you do come across a 2-finger, even if you're really, really ballsy and if you're doing monos, you know, like me personally, like I might be able to hang a mono, like physically, but mentally I don't think I'm ready for that. So that's something that you need to work into your training a little bit and get more comfortable with. And I got a question a while back on how I deal with full crimps, and like I've said before, I shied away because of the research and the common perception around full crimping that it is a good way to pop a pulley. But that being said, I have tried to do very limited loading in a full crimp position. Now you have to be really careful on this. I wouldn't suggest doing it that often, but if you're going to do it on outdoor climbs or on gym climbs that you want to send, then you have to be comfortable in that position. And half of it's just mental. It's just being comfortable in that position. Like, oh my God, like I can actually hold that like that. So I'm not going to tell you guys how much to do it or when to do it. I'm just going to tell you to use it very sparingly and to be careful when you actually go into that full crimping position. So what is your guys' favorite gripping position? Did I miss something? Is there something that you would like to see another video on that is more exciting? Let me know in the comments down below. And if you guys are looking for more training advice, check out this video right here. And if you're looking for a playlist to keep yourself entertained right now, check out this one. And catch you later.